Let's sit nice and tall. Close the eyes. Focus on the breath. Allow the breath to carry you into a deeper awareness of yourself. Allow yourself to recognize the sacredness of each inhale and each exhale. Give yourself permission to experience the peace and the promise that each breath brings. Drawing the hands together in front of the heart, we'll lift our voices in one Om, followed by the invocation mantras. Om. Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha Hari Om. Ganana Antva Ganapati Gom Havamahe Kavin Kavinam Upamashravastamam Jyestarajam Brahmanan Brahmanaspata Anashrinvanuti Basidha Sadhanam Mahaganapataye Namaha Prano Devi Saraswati Vaje Vajini Vati Dhinama Vitriyavatu Ano Divo Brahataf Parvatada Saraswati Ajata Gantu Yagnyam Havan Devi Jujushana Gritachi Shagmam Novacha Mushati Shrinotu Vagdevaye Namaha. Resting the hands down, gently fluttering the eyes open. And so the invocation mantra is such an important part of our practice because they set us into a particular position, into a particular direction. They remind us, of the divinity of all of this gathering together. The first one, the Om Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha, is a salutation to the Guru. Now, who's the Guru? God is the Guru. That divine consciousness that moves through the universe is the Guru. Some of you may have a physical embodied Guru, and it's that also. But the crux of it, the root of it, is that it is that divine consciousness and that divine creativity, that Shiva and Shakti, or whatever name it happens to be that you call that. The second of the invocations is to Ganesha. And Ganesha he's oftentimes referred to as the remover of obstacles. That's not all he is, though. He doesn't just, happily dance his way over by you and say, oh, you have an obstacle, I'll take that for you. As a matter of fact, very oftentimes he puts them there. And he says, this is what's needed on your path. So here's the obstacle, and teaching moment, here is what you need to resolve it. And then you have the free will that has been given to you as a birthright in this life to either choose to use the tools that have been given to you to resolve your own obstacles, or to say, nah, I like the suffering, thank you. Or I'm not ready. Maybe that's what the answer is, I'm not ready. I have the tools, not ready. But that's your free will. But Ganesha is, in some aspect, the one who supports the removal or resolution of the obstacles, and sometimes he places them there. His name, Ganesha or Ganapati, actually translates as Lord of the Ganas. Lord of the Ganas. Ganesha is a Gana. And the Ganas were considered to be a mischievous bunch of soldiers, of warrior beings. And they were known for their pranksters, for their prankster heart. So they would always get themselves in a little bit of hot water because they'd be pranking on everybody all the time. And I have a funny feeling that that's associated with the placement of the obstacles and then the removal of them. And, so he's known as the Lord of the Ganas. He's also known to be the keeper of the gate of the Muladhara chakra. Hello, Lena. The keeper of the gate of the Muladhara chakra. And so for most of you, I'm going to make the assumption that you know that that's the base chakra, it's the primal chakra, it's the root chakra. It's the chakra that's associated with safety and security, with the ability to feel stable and grounded. And so he's associated with that too. He's also associated with mantra. He's associated with a lot. He's also associated with mantra. And so he is the bestower of mantra. He's the protector of it. And so we invoke him in order to be good chanters, to remember the Sanskrit and the mantras and the meanings of the mantras, and to allow them to abide within our heart and to be expressed from our heart. So there's a lot in that one mantra. We ask for his protection, And then the third invocation is the Saraswati Prarthana, the Saraswati hymn. And this Saraswati, she's the mother of creativity and education. She is the goddess of sound and vibration. That speaks for itself. What we're asking her for is knowledge, wisdom. We're not asking her to know, basic worldly knowledge. That could be part of it. But ideally, we're asking her for that ultimate knowledge, the knowledge of the self, knowledge of the truth of the self that goes beyond the egoic identification and into the realm of the sacred, the divine. And it's not that our egoic sense of self is not divine, because it is, in a strange kind of way. It is, but it's also an obstacle unto itself. It's the free will that catches us up, It's the free will that catches us up because we have the free will to abide in a higher, more unified truth of ourself, or to abide in some other story that we tell ourselves about how we're not worthy, we're not valuable, we're not this, we're not that. So this free will that we've been given as a gift is really, it's a beautiful thing, but it's also a great, great obstacle in and of itself. So we invoke Saraswati Ma, and we say, awaken within me the knowledge of the self, the knowledge of the innermost self, the higher self, however you'd like to phrase that. And let me move away from the limited self, thinking that that's all I am. Let me move away from that belief and into a deeper understanding of who I really am and what I really am. So these invocation mantras are very important. And there are thousands of mantras, thousands upon thousands of them. And what each mantra awakens within us depends upon the mantra itself. Some mantras awaken within us knowledge of the self on some level. Some mantras awaken within us courage, steadfastness, interest, curiosity, compassion, intrigue. It sounds like a good spy movie, doesn't it? Some mantras awaken within us a deep, deep compassion, an empathy, and a willingness to forgive. Because it also awakens within us certain mantras, the ability to witness our own path and the path of others, and have understanding of those paths. Forgiveness is what I had wanted to talk a little bit about today. We have a limited understanding, generally speaking, of what forgiveness is. In our mind, we think we know. I would pretty much guarantee that if I were to ask anybody in this room what forgiveness was, you would give me a great answer. You would say, well, it's about, letting go of your anger towards someone or something that happened in your life that you felt was harmful to you, so that you're not carrying that burden anymore. And I would say you're absolutely partly correct. It is. It's definitely about letting go of something. But defining that something is really a little challenging, because most of us are ready to let go of a little something and not a little something else. Most of us are willing to say, in this moment, I don't want to carry the burden of my anger or my hate or my memories or my story anymore. I'm tired of the suffering. But there's a big but that's attached to that. But I've gotten used to those things. And my anger is a little bit of a safe haven. I kind of feel like it keeps me safe. My anger protects me from mistakes or from any further harm. And the reality is, no, it doesn't. Your anger does not keep you safe. Your anger does not guarantee you that you will not be hurt in this life. Your hatred does not keep you safe. It does not guarantee you that you will not be harmed in this life. And I know that that's like a really heavy thing to say, but it's the truth. All you have to do is think about it for a moment. Has your anger ever kept you safe? Or has it gotten you in more hot water? Yeah, has your hatred, and it's very normal that if somebody has done something to hurt you in this life, it's very normal that for some period of time following, you feel hatred or animosity toward that person. Has anybody here never felt that towards somebody? Of course, because it's very human. Somebody inflicts a harm upon us as we see it, and we retaliate with our emotions. And that emotion can be hatred, it can be vengeance, it can be animosity, distrust, all these other things. They've never kept us safe. Those feelings have never kept us safe. The only thing that they have done for us is two things. The first thing they have done for us is unfortunate, because they have locked us into a cycle of retelling the story to ourselves mentally of what happened. The second thing that they have done for us is potentially fortunate, if they've actually done it. That they have propelled us to move beyond them and toward a deeper understanding of our own resiliency, a deeper understanding of our own capacity to heal. Because as I said, it's not wrong that if somebody has harmed you in some way, whether they've broken a vow they made to you or they physically hurt you, it's not wrong to feel anger toward them, to feel hatred for a period of time. It's not wrong. It's actually human health. It's psychologically healthy as a human for a period of time to go through that. When it cannot be resolved is when it becomes a problem, a mental health problem, a life problem. So those feelings are not meant to be the mud that we get stuck in. Any of you ever walk outside in muck boots? I've recently found, renewed my love of muck boots. I haven't had a pair in years. And we've recently acquired the property next door, and it gets really mucky over there because the streams that go through. So I went and I got myself a pair of muck boots, and they're like the greatest thing in the world. They are, I swear. Treading back there, walking through the stream. And I'm walking through, one of the trails that we're making, and I stepped down, and I went to take the next step, and my foot came out of the shoe. Now, I wasn't going to go much further after that, So I had to put my foot back in the shoe and get it out of the mud. But that's what happens to us, is that we stick our foot in the anger and the hate and the animosity, and it gets stuck there, and then we can't move forward without some further work to be done. And the further work to be done is an understanding of where it is that we are in a particular moment, of facing directly what it is that we're feeling and going through. And then the deep intentional work of willingness. Willingness to do what? Oh, I can feel all the little hairs on the back of everybody's neck going up. Yeah. Well, the first level of work is acceptance. That's the first level of work, is acceptance. Acceptance that, yes, I'm going to speak in first person. I have been traumatized by this. Whatever it is that has happened, it has affected me. And it is not what I chose for myself. It is not what I would have chosen for myself. I did not have control over the situation. Whatever words you want to use. The first part of that work is acceptance. To no longer deny. This should not have happened. This could not have happened. Those words of denial, while they may give us a little bit of a feeling of, I don't know, what would the word be, righteousness in a moment, they're not purposeful for us, because what happened in the past has happened. It happened. So to stop denying it, to do that work, is utterly important in the acceptance phase of our own grief, trauma, and anger. This is why I feel hurt. This is why I feel angry. It happened. I'm not going to deny it. I'm not going to question its validity. It freaking happened. Then, once we have that, where do we go to from there? We say, okay, it happened. How has it affected me? How has it affected me? And that is a big, big question. And we don't go from the first to the second neatly and succinctly. It's a little bit of acceptance and a little bit of questioning, a little bit more acceptance, a little bit more questioning, and there's some other things too that are going to get thrown in there. But it's a mishmash. It's a messy little journey that we're on. It's not straightforward. It's not like, well, I've done this work for a year, I'm over it. No. I've done this work for 10 lifetimes, I ain't over it yet. It's ongoing. And the reason for that is because most of yourself is hidden from yourself. Most of us do not know how things affect us right away. We just don't know. And it's very possible that we don't know for years and years and years to come. We hear, if every so often an article may come to across your Facebook page or on the news or something, and it'll be about perhaps a woman or a man who's maybe 80 some odd years old, and they just remembered a trauma that happened to them as a child. It took decades for them to even remember the trauma. And then all of a sudden there's a realization. Oh, maybe that's why I had difficulty trusting. Maybe that's why I was defensive so much of the time. Maybe that's why. And then that whole journey begins. Looking at, how has this affected me? So we need to keep that in mind as we're entering in and out of that state. We have to keep in mind that it's a process. It's not a one-time question going to have the entire answer all at once. But as we are involved in the work of our own trauma and of the potential of forgiveness, we come into this place of self-study. So we have acceptance, the acceptance that this has happened. We're no longer denying it or asking why. And why should we not ask why? We're going to ask it anyway because it's our nature as human beings. But we're never going to get a satisfactory answer. Nope. Because if that was possible, our healing would be rapid, quick. All you have to do is tell me why the person behaved that way. And that'll answer it for me. That will quash my curiosity. It will give me a validated reason for a person to behave in such a way, and then I'll be able to be over it. But no matter how many times we hear the why, we still can't accept it. We won't accept it. Because the why is not highly purposeful to us. Because we're still kind of stuck in the place of this should have never happened. And as long as we're stuck in the place of this should have never happened, then the why doesn't matter. Does that make sense somehow, a little bit, sort of? Yeah. It's a tough topic, I know. So I thank you all for bearing with me through this. But the acceptance and then how has what has happened affected my life leads us into the self-study, the kind of the first layers of svadhyaya, the niyama, of looking into the self and taking an inventory of the self. And it's the hardest thing to do, because when we're in those moments of raw recollection of our traumas or the anger that comes after, like when an earthquake happens, there's the follow-up earthquakes. It's the same thing, right? The trauma happens and then there's the follow-up to that. It's difficult to turn inside and take an inventory of the self. That takes a lot of support, a lot of steadfastness, a lot of courage. Most of us are still looking out. We're so busy looking out that we almost cannot look in. So we have to try. We need to try. We don't have to do anything, but it's beneficial to us to try to stop asking external questions that cannot be answered in full satisfaction of ourself. And instead, take that energy, turn it inward, and cultivate a genuine, deep interest and intention to heal the self in spite of the externalities. Does that make sense? Yeah. So we really need to, in light of our traumas, become just a little bit selfish, just a little bit self-centered. We need to say, I'm not going to expend this energy on the externalities of this anymore. I need to turn that energy inward. If a person had chronic fatigue and they kept running marathons, what would you tell them to do?
Stop running the marathon.
Stop running for a while, at least a little while. Let yourself heal. Well, stop throwing your energy out in directions and toward people who aren't really interested in your healing. And instead, turn it inward. Invest in yourself, in true self-care. I have a beautiful, wonderful student. She's not the only one. There's several of them that I have said this to. I gave them the prescription of a day of true self-care. Good. So no pedicures, no reading magazines, gossip things, no watching television, no listening to the radio. Those things are not self-care. They're agitators, No reading the latest novella, none of this stuff, right? No. A day of self-care, silence. A day of self-care. Sit by the window with a cup of tea, not too hot, the appropriate blend, and just pay attention to the sky, to the birds. Pay attention to nature a little bit, just as kind of a softening agent, right? Focus your mind on unity, on completeness, on peace. Oh, she loved this idea. She said, this is amazing. Absolutely love this. So she goes home and she came back a couple weeks later. And I didn't even realize, that she had done this yet, but she did. She did it right away, like a couple of days later or the next day or something. And she came back. She said, I lasted 10 minutes. I lasted 10 minutes. I said, of course you lasted 10 minutes. I am so thrilled that you tried, absolutely thrilled. It brings tears to my eyes. But that's because that's how difficult it is to kind of turn off the externalities and to go in. It's so difficult that I give her a lot of credit. She lasted 10 minutes. I think most people would have been around 2 or 3 maybe, unless that was really good tea, then maybe 10 minutes. So the self-study of it requires that you go into silence for a little while. And it doesn't have to be absolute silence, but it needs to be turning down the volume of what you're listening to from the outside world and turning up the volume of what the heart is asking you for. That's really super important. So what does all this have to do with forgiveness? Because without this preparatory work, forgiveness is not really possible. Forgiveness is not really possible. And what is forgiveness? Because we haven't even talked about that yet. Not really. I mean, we kind of did a little bit at first, but I'm going to go somewhere else with it. Because forgiveness is not about the other person. Forgiveness is about you. And forgiveness is not about, how do I say this? Forgiveness is not about letting whoever it is on the other side, whatever it is on the other side, off the hook so that you don't have to carry a lighter burden on your shoulders. That's not forgiveness either. Right? That's kind of a selling point in modern psychology for forgiveness. Well, if you want to carry less of a burden, let them off the hook and, in a variety of words, you'll feel better. No, you won't. You won't. You're not going to feel better. You're not going to feel better till you work through your trauma. You're not going to feel better by letting them off the hook when you still feel like shit. Okay? That's not going to happen. So don't think of forgiveness as letting someone else off the hook, because that's not what it is. Forgiveness is your own capacity to love yourself in spite of what has happened to you. Forgiveness is an inward journey first and foremost. Forgiveness is the ability to say to yourself, I'm no longer mad at myself for being in the wrong place at that particular time, for being vulnerable, for being breakable, for being human, for being. I'm no longer mad at myself for that. Now, there's a lot more to it than that, because that sounds simple, right? We could all say that right now. There's a lot more to it. There's this idea in yoga that we're all exactly where it is that we're meant to be in every moment of our life. And I know some people don't like that, right? I was one of those people for a really long time. Like, don't tell me. Always in the right place at the right time. That's irritating, truly. I'll be honest with you. That statement can be irritating. But if you stop to think about it for a little while, whatever trauma that you have experienced in your life, and all trauma that you have experienced in your life, if you could eliminate that one thing, it would leave a niche that something else would have had to fill. And you're not guaranteed that something else would have been better or worse. Something would have happened to you. Something will continue to happen to us because we live in a world that we don't have control over. So accepting that we're always exactly where it is that we're meant to be is to simply say we're alive, having a life experience, and something is going to happen in this moment. Does that make sense? Right? It's not comforting, but it makes sense. Something is going to happen in this moment, just like something happened in past moments, and something will happen in future moments. And what that something is, I have very little control over. What I do have control over is my own self and how I walk into each moment, how I arrive in each moment. So my suggestion is that when a trauma is inflicted, our tendency is to go to self-blame first. Self-blame. Because we have not yet accepted the inevitability of pain in this life, of suffering in this life. We live largely in fairy tales where everything works out. We live largely in fairy tales where, the prince shows up and gives her a kiss and she wakes up from a 100-year sleep. We live in these things. This is what we're told. And we live in a world where we think that justice prevails. We live in a world where we think justice prevails. Justice doesn't prevail in this world. Sometimes we get lucky. Sometimes we get lucky and the law works. Sometimes we're fortunate and people have a change of heart. But we don't live in a world where justice has the upper hand. If it did, so much of the suffering that we see out there, so much of the trauma being inflicted on different groups of people wouldn't be happening. What we do live in is a world that's chaotic, unpredictable. We get a dose of difficulty, and we can equally get a dose of joy and peace and bliss. We can. We are the receptacle to that. And if we don't have a love relationship with our own self, then whatever we receive will be received in light of that. If trauma comes our way and we're doing the work of self-forgiveness, then we will know how to cradle ourselves. We will know how to understand that what has happened because we live in a world where we live in a body and things are going to happen. And it's not in our control to make it not happen. Yeah? Does that make sense? Just like when good things come our way, if we are not doing the work of self-forgiveness, then we won't necessarily have the deep level of appreciation and gratitude that we could have for those things that come our way, that are easy, that are sweet, that are gentle and kind. Instead, we'll see them as okay but boring. I want a little drama. How many of you have ever said in your life, I want a little drama? You got a little drama, and then you called it trauma. It's true, So be mindful of that. And when the sweetness comes to you, when the ease comes, receive it. But keep in mind that the reception is far more likely to be meaningful if you're doing the work of self-forgiveness. So this idea of forgiveness only comes through as you're involved in self-study, as you're involved in investing yourself in the awareness of your spiritual path, the purpose of your life, the absolute vulnerability that we all share in this life. And as you are allowing your heart of compassion to grow in the face of all of the uncertainties and violence that exist in this human-made world, that you're still allowing your compassionate heart to grow. You're not closing it off. You're not shutting it down. You're allowing it to be present, to see and to witness your own path with a reverence and an honoring, and see and witness the path of all others also. And yes, that all others does include any individual who you feel has harmed you. That you see their action for what it is. And what is it? Evidence of suffering. It doesn't make it right. It's not an excuse. It's not a bypassing. It's not saying, well, I know you're suffering, so whatever you've done to me in the past, I forgive you. No, that's not what it says. It says, I see the depth of human suffering causes the continuation of violent behavior in all of us. In all of us. So now, be awakened to ending your own violence and strengthening your own compassion, your own capacity to love, to accept yourself, Now, I know that sounds kind of self-centered a little bit, right? But what happens, you can't take a shortcut. You can't go and say, well, if I can forgive you, then everything will be okay. Because that's not true. You haven't forgiven yourself yet. When I forgive myself, then eventually I will naturally come to a place of forgiveness for all others. Once I forgive myself, once I learn how to forgive myself, how to love myself, I know it sounds so cliche, but it's true. To love myself, to honor myself, to cherish myself, to appreciate my life, to have gratitude, true gratitude. Not like I'm really grateful for the easy things in life because, hey, they're easy. But also I'm grateful for the difficulties in life because they have challenged me. They've made me look in the mirror and make an assessment of myself. I'm tired of assessing myself. It's all I ever do is assess myself. I don't want to have to assess myself. You're assessing yourself now. You're always assessing yourself. That's one of those statements that just doesn't make sense. When we say, I don't want to do the work anymore. I don't want to assess myself. But every moment you're judging yourself. Every moment you're doing it. Would you agree? So if you're doing it anyway, every moment, typically from an ego place, then what's stopping you from saying, since I'm partaking in this behavior anyway, I'm going to come at it from a different angle. I'm going to move from here to here. I'm going to make the assessment, the self-study, the svadhyaya from the place of the heart. And perhaps cultivate with myself a deeper understanding and a more profound forgiveness. It's an uncomfortable subject, isn't it? It is. But it's part of the path of yoga. It's part of the path of any spirituality, no matter what you call it. Self-forgiveness. Without self-forgiveness, there will not be joy, true joy. Without self-forgiveness, there won't be forgiveness of anybody else. There'll be words, and then there'll be trepidation and doubt and a waiting for the next bomb to drop, And we'll say, well, I'm forgiving people because it's what I'm told I'm supposed to do. Well, those people who told you to forgive other people haven't forgiven other people also. They haven't done the work too. If they did, they would say to you, stop worrying about the one who hurt you. Start concerning yourself with you. You can't change that other person. You can't make them into a good person. You can't make them into a peaceful person. You can't make them different. They have to do that. That's their work. And that's the next stage of forgiveness, is understanding what belongs to you and what doesn't. The harm that other people commit does not belong to you. It impacts you, but it does not belong to you. It is not something that you can change. If we could change it, then our penal system would work, right? Because a person commits a trauma and they're put in jail. Does that end their committing of traumas? No. As a matter of fact, it oftentimes intensifies. And a person is put in jail for supposedly rehabilitative purposes, but they don't become rehabilitated in there because they are committing violence or vulnerable to more violence. So that idea is just, it's not valid. It's not valid. I'm a huge proponent of counseling. I think counseling, even though you can get sick of it, you can get so tired of it, you can end up, for a little while just wanting to wash your hands of it completely. Totally understandable because it's hard work, but it's necessary work because you're talking to somebody who is not you. who can hopefully, if they're doing a great job, they can be a mirror. They're not you, but they can be a mirror for you. They can ask you questions. They can repeat things back to you so that you can hear it with your ears rather than just say it with your emotions. Do you ever do that with somebody where you have a conversation and they say something to you and you repeat back to them? You say, "This is what I just heard you say," and you repeat there as close to exact as you can get. Is that what you meant? Inevitably, they'll say, "No, not exactly." Because they get to hear their own inability to express themselves accurately. So counseling is great because it puts us right in front of that. The other thing about counseling is that it's wonderful because if you're with a great counselor, they will teach you about forgiveness. They will teach you about forgiveness. And if they're a thoughtful, mindful counselor, it won't be about forgiving the other. It will be about forgiving yourself. No matter the trauma that a person has experienced in this world, whether they themselves think it's a tiny little trauma or a huge trauma, the person that they inevitably blame is themselves. They'll point their finger at somebody else out of shame, out of guilt, out of anger. But for every finger that you point at someone else, 2, 3, 4 are pointing back at you. It's just such a true statement. So forgiveness of your own self first. And then in that self-forgiveness, in that capacity to cultivate a relationship with yourself that is based in health, in self-study, in self-care, then we begin to witness, and we have to be careful because this can be a little bit of a slippery slope. We begin to witness the journey of others. And if we think that we're getting it right, then we will point out all the places they're getting it wrong. And then our journey will temporarily become a comparative game. All the things I'm doing good and well and healing, and your light's still a little dim or getting dimmer, And we have to be careful because that's an egoic trap. It's an egoic trap to come into that comparison game. Instead, we need to constantly remind ourselves that as we come into the place of profoundly witnessing the journey of other individuals, it is only for the reason of humbling ourselves. Humbling ourselves. And initially it might not make much sense, but the more that we can humble ourselves to the suffering of others, the more we will understand the universal nature of suffering and everything that entails. And that place of humility is what allows us to forgive the other. Now, forgiveness is not, now I'm going to put my arms around you and give you a big bear hug because I'm no longer mad at you. I'm going to let you back into my life. You have absolute access. No. Forgiveness is not that. I'm going to drop the charges. I'm not going to blame you. No, that's not forgiveness. That's foolishness. That's foolishness. Forgiveness is, I understand suffering is what compels all violence. Violence to the self and violence to others. I understand that. Truly. And therefore I can forgive because an individual who is caught in that mud will do anything to get out of it, even if it involves hurting someone else. That being said, self-care has a protective mechanism to it also. It says, yes, I can forgive, but I do not forget. I do not forget that no matter how much work a person has done, including myself, we are all still suffering. And therefore, as the yoga teachings tell us, we are all still susceptible. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna. In the Devi Mahatmya, the Divine Mother says it. Shiva says it in the Shiva Purana. It's in so many different texts. And it says, all human beings who exist in the embodied state are vulnerable to the battle of the gunas. The gunas are the qualities of nature. And they are rajas, which is passion, tamas, which is lethargy. There's a lot of other words that we can put to them, but we'll just use these for now. And sattva, which is balance. We're constantly engulfed in the battle of these things, these characteristics of nature. These characteristics of nature that I'm pointing out there at the trees, but I should be pointing here. These qualities of nature that exist out there and in here. And even if I am doing the deepest, most profound work of my life, and I am coming into a deep, profound, understanding of something about myself, I'm practicing self-forgiveness. I'm attempting to witness the journey of others and come into an empathy for their suffering. Still, in the midst of all of that work, the gunas are still battling each other. They are still highly unpredictable, and I am still vulnerable to them, and I always will be, as long as I am in an embodied state, an embodied individual that lives in a world where I cannot control what happens outside of me. And I have very little control about what happens inside of me because I haven't exercised that muscle yet. Does that make sense? I know it's a heavy conversation, isn't it? Should we lighten it up with a joke or something? So these two yogis go in a bar. There. Questions or reflections so far? It's a difficult, uncomfortable topic. But it's one that's really important. All topics in yoga, from what I have learned so far, are uncomfortable. There is no topic in yoga that is comfortable. Not at all. They all put you on your toes. They all make the hair on the back of your neck rise up. And they do it for great, great reason. Because as long as we walk around with the bag over our head or the head in the sand, the longer we're lost. The longer we're lost. And what are we lost to? Ourself. So we have to start somewhere. We have to start asking ourselves questions. Why do I feel so lost? What is it that I am not seeing? What is it that I am not doing? And that is not a blame. The tradition of Sanatana Dharma is not a tradition that says it's all your fault, as in something to be shamed about. The tradition of Sanatana Dharma is a question-based tradition. The Guru Parampara, the lineages of gurus through time, in all of the traditions that come from Sanatana Dharma, they are a question-based tradition. And what that means is that the student is never expected to follow blindly anything that they are told, anything that they learn. They are hopefully expected, and of course there's variations in teachers, but in the tradition, the student is to ask questions and then have experiences that inform them of the validity of the teachings for their own self. And that's true whether you're sitting in satsang or walking through life having a problem and asking a friend for advice. You don't just blindly take advice from anybody. You don't blindly follow anybody. You ask questions and then you pay attention. You apply what you choose to apply and you learn. And you knowingly apply what you have learned to the best of your ability. So this idea that, that there could be what we could call a blind forgiveness. In yoga, that's no. And yes, there are teachings that say to forgive is divine, and that do talk about the ability of an individual to accept another individual, no matter their behavior, to be able to receive whatever comes in. But they're not talking about your average human being who is a householder. They're talking about the capacity of saints to be hung on a cross, to be burned on a fire, to give up their own life for the sake of humanity or all beings everywhere. When they talk in such high esoteric terms, they're not talking about us as householders. They're talking about the saints and what they were capable of doing, and that their sacrifice is an example to us that we are capable of doing much more than what we are doing. We may not be capable of, praying peacefully while we're being burned at the stake, but we certainly are capable of forgiving ourselves for our own trespasses. And then we definitely are capable of making the vow to trespass less, to walk a little lighter upon the earth, to extend kindness a little further than what our fingertips can reach. We're certainly capable of that. And so we can be inspired by those highly esoteric teachings that talk about absolute surrender, absolutely, and recognize that in this moment that potentially does not pertain to us, but some part of it does. The part of it that inspires us to continue on in greater mercy, with a greater gratitude, with a greater vision, and all for the sake of a greater unity. Does that make sense? Yeah. Do a time check real quick. We have a couple more minutes. Any questions or reflections for today's talk? Yes.
So this is a topic that has really been on my mind lately, so I'm so thrilled you brought it up. And it sort of feels like we're just a little bit scratching the surface a bit on the topic of forgiveness. So I'm wondering, what are some good next steps for people to try to take to continue on that path?
Absolutely. Such a great question. And yes, you are 100% correct. It's a little scratch. It's a tiny little... This is the whole surface, and this is what we just did. the little tiny, tiny microscopic part of our nail touched the surface. There's so much more to do. But where do we begin? Make assessments. Write a list. Who am I mad at and why? Who am I angry at and why? Who do I hate and why? And remind yourself. Now, I know that can be super uncomfortable too, because it sounds kind of like you're listing other people's faults, but that's not the purpose of the list. The purpose of the list is to take an inventory of where you stand in relationship to all those people in your life that you're pissed off at. So I'm mad at Joe because of so-and-so, Sue because of so-and-so, Jane because of so-and-so, Jack because of so-and-so. I hate this person because of what they did to me in high school. Whatever it happens to be. Make your list of people that you are constantly, whether you know it or not, keeping in your mind in anticipation of further hate and anger. Make that list. And then assess the list. What do they all have in common? What do they all have in common? And why have I not let go of this yet? Why is it still so fresh in my mind and memory that I'm talking about what happened to me when I was 16, 18, 12, 30, 50? What is the common theme that goes through? This is a self-study practice. It's not a practice of saying, well, all of these people are just jerks, and I'm the only one that's not. No, It's looking at this and trying to find the themes that run through everything in life. And you can journal on that. You can spend some time with it. It's not one sitting kind of a thing, It's like you're walking through the store getting your half a gallon of oat milk, and all of a sudden you think about Kevin from 3rd grade and how he pulled your ponytail, And then you think to yourself, well, I bet his life turned out really crappy. Put him on the list, You go to work next Wednesday, and your boss says something that irritates you, and you go into the office and you start talking to your co-employee, and you're like, isn't he just the greatest son of a guy, And I'll bet you he's got a horrible home life. Put him on the list. What do all these people have in common? I'm not going to give that away. But there's a few things they all have in common. And it's not that they're bad people. They may have bad habits. They may have harmful habits, but there's something else that they all have in common. So then once you're engulfed in like making that assessment, then make another list of all the people you've ever hurt. And be honest. Of all the people you ever hurt. Because Kevin pulled your ponytail and then you kicked him. So-and-so stole your homework, and then you put bubble gum, on their chair. Your boss gave you a hard time, and then you went and gossiped about him. So make a secondary list of all the people that you ever hurt, and then look at that list and figure out what they all have in common. You might be getting what they all have in common right now. And then as you're doing that, yes, it's serious work. There's also a little bit of humor there. As you start going through this, it's like, oh, dear Lord, the patterns are just amazing. And you're going to uncover or remember or list down some pretty heavy traumas too. And my suggestion to you is that you have someone to talk to. Because as you start doing this work of self-forgiveness, it is to be expected. To not expect it is to be foolish. It is to be expected that it's going to bring things to the surface, and you need somebody to talk to. So a counselor or your go-to person who is not your bartender, by the way. And typically not, your friends are okay for that kind of conversation, but they're just going to take your side. So they might not be the best neutrality available. You got to find kind of a neutral person that's willing to have a conversation, a go-to, someone who can just hold space for you while you express yourself. If you have a loving partner, you can say to them, look, right now I'm kind of going through something as I'm reliving some trauma. I just need 10 minutes to vent and have someone hear me. I don't need to be fixed. I just need to be able to say that I don't know what the hell I want to freaking say in this moment, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to cry. I don't need to be fixed. I don't need to be hugged unless I ask for that. I just need to express. Have a safe person that will let you do that. That won't coddle you or baby you or anything along those lines. They will just accept you raw. So that's kind of the first thing that you could do. Another thing that you can do is you can start spending more time in self-care. Anybody remember what that entails? Silence and nature. Absolutely. Silence and nature. Not getting involved in all of those externalized activities that we typically involve ourselves in. And, a whole day of that is a lot to ask of anybody. But you can manage 10 minutes. I know you can because one of my students just did it. So 10 minutes of just silence. Turn off the radio, turn off the phone, turn off the computer, get away from it. Go sit under a tree and close your eyes and just listen to the birds. Place one hand on the heart, one hand on the belly, and just be with yourself. If you met somebody in a cafe, they were reading your favorite book, drinking a latte, and you love latte, and that's your favorite book, and maybe you would be compelled to say something to them, to get to know them a little bit. You might walk over and say, oh, I've read that book, it's so wonderful. Can we have a conversation? You would spend some time to get to know them. Maybe, yeah. If you want to get to know anybody, what do you have to do?
Spend time.
Spend time with them. If you want to get to know yourself, what do you have to do? Yeah. You have to spend time with yourself. So going out to dinner or to the movies with your family isn't spending time with yourself. Going and getting pedicures and listening to everything and being distracted by the lights and the pretty colors, that's not spending time with yourself. Spending time with yourself is being alone in silence. That's spending time with yourself. Holding a space in that time where your mind can have whatever thoughts it wants to have, and you're not grabbing onto them, holding them, keeping them hostage. You're just saying they're like clouds going through the sky. They come and they go, and there's another one waiting, so I don't need to hold on to it. I can just let it be. That's spending time with that's getting to know yourself. But it's a scary prospect for 99.9% of all people. So those are the three things. The list of all the people in your life that have you perceive to have harmed you in some way, shape, or form, no matter how little or big. Who you yourself have done that to, no matter how little or big. And you'll see that first column will be much easier than the second, because the second will be full of justifications. Well, yeah, I did kick Kevin, but he pulled my ponytail. Doesn't matter. Violence is violence. So make that second list. And then spend a lot of time, well, at least a lot more time than what you already are, with yourself, silently, without distractions. And just get to know you. Get to know who you are. Yeah. And then we'll continue the conversation. Yeah. Because it's going to take a lot of satsangs to cover this whole, table with little scratches. Any other thoughts or reflections right now? Questions or reflections? We're good? Okay. Let's close the eyes. We'll sit nice and tall. Draw the hands together in front of the heart. We'll lift our voices in one Om and one All Beings mantra. Take a breath in. Om. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Om shanti shanti shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Om Shri Matre Namaha. Thank you all so much for being here today. So wonderful to gather with each and every one of you. Thank you to our retreat attendees for spending the weekend with us. We're so grateful. Thank you to all the students for continually coming back, for continually attending, for continually doing the work. Just remember, it's not one time. It's a lifetime. Times. Thousands of lifetimes. And so it's an ongoing conversation. And in many ways, that's the beauty of it. You don't fall in love so that you have one tiny little second. You fall in love so you have a plethora of love experiences, right? Would you say? Well, it's the same thing here, You don't do the healing work so you have 1 second of healing experience. You do it so that you can continually re-experience your own healing. So it's wonderful work. It really is. All right. Now, enjoy your brunch. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll see you all really soon. Thank you.